Okay, I have to take this off here. Do 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 I can pay my own light bill, baby. What's up there, star people? Hello. All right. There's something weird going on here. Oh. Okay. Well, fine. Whatever. So, welcome to Star People Storytime. Welcome. Yesterday, we read chapters oh boy, what chapters did we read? What chapters did we read? 29 and 30, I believe. And so today we're going to be reading, I don't remember what chapters did we read yesterday? OMG, my brain just said bloop. Okay, so, and see, I was editing last night, so I don't remember. Every reading is a type of heaven. Yeah, we read chapter 29 and 30. That's what happened. And so today we are reading chapter 31 and 30. Chapter 31. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Just confuddled and confounded. Hi. So I'm going to start over because we're having a bit of a brain fart. Welcome to Star People Storytime. And yesterday, I think, we had read chapter 29 and chapter 30. I can't remember if that is what happened, but I believe we figured out how Picard Yes. Okay, hold that thought. I gotta make sure. Reckless records. Okay, figure out what happened here. See, that's why God invented other phones. This is just very... and none of my people are on here to be able to tell me what we read. Or maybe today we're dealing with faulty. You can just wait a second. No. P. S. Okay. Aubrey, what are you doing? I'm on camera, honey. Oh. Bye. Wow. Today is just one of those days, isn't it? All right, one more second. One more second. And one more second after that. And one more second after that. Whew. I'm going to know. I'm going to know. Yes, Jesus. Okay. So last night, for Star People Storytime, we read chapters 29 and 30. Lovely. Okay, and so what happened in chapters 29 and 30, for those of you who are all caught up, and if you are not caught up, you can go over to the Facebook page that is the Stellar Trilogy series, and you can watch all the videos. See, now I've caught my bearings. We're going to rock and roll. So chapter 29, we figured out how Picard made a cord, which is very interesting. The very first line was, "How did you make a boy?" That happened. Yamin, who is Kai's ex-bae and Picard's dad, he turned up, and it was a lot. And then we figured out that Gabe, French-speaking Gabe, was actually Kai's original angelic, who was in book 1, like all prominent. He was the one that kind of set this whole story off, so that was kind of deep. And then Yamin was trying to explain to Kai that he came bearing insight and that she needed to listen to him. And Kai wasn't having it because she had already been through everything to, you know, forget and forgive and move on and all of that stuff. She had a new life. She had a new husband. She had her whole life all figured out. And here comes this fool. And he's not a fool. He's an elder. So the both of them had to, you know, figure out how this arrangement was going to work. But of course, Kai, she's strong and she's not you're just not going to come up here and tell her all kinds of stuff that she's just not interested in hearing. So that happened too. They had a little exchange and it ended up being like, oh, I forgot. So the end, essentially Elder Yamin had to put Kai kind of in her place a little bit, and I'm using that lightly because Kai was so busy focused on Yamin and being pissed off at Yamin that she was missing a part of the element that was about to happen. We came to the understanding in the last chapter that the Magnanite tree needs things very, very, very specific. And in this case, it seems that the Magnanite tree is collecting all of Kai's family together. And so that means that Kai 2's dad, Henny, is about to make an appearance. And that is a dun dun dun. So now that we're all caught up, we can go on to chapter 31. I think we may just read chapter 31 today, because chapter 32 is, and you know, from this point forth it's very involved. And so the only reason why I was doubling up chapters was I tried to keep the themes together, so that, especially if the chapters were small, I tried to keep the themes together. But this chapter isn't really that long, but it's a gateway, and I want to make sure that when we go into next week, and we're going to probably finish next week. When we go into next week, we have a very nice coupling, right? Okay, so happy Sunday and welcome to chapter 31. This chapter is called Preparations, but the P is in parentheses, and so it kind of looks like it could be preparations or it could be reparations. Either one. It's a play on words, I'm sure. All right then, I'll go to hell. Mark Twain said that. It took a long while for Kai to realize she was in a mini trance. She was standing so quietly, staring into space, she hadn't noticed that the large crowd of Sai that were standing outside of the pyramid were filing in the pyramid. They were all standing around her, singing a song she didn't know. Jasperai was unfolding a piece of fabric he was holding and had pulled a glittering object out of the center of it gingerly. He held the glittering object up to the center of the pyramid, which lit the thing up as he put it around Kai's neck. Kai felt a rumble around her neck, but wasn't paying discernible attention to the process. Everything was moving around her, and she knew she was there, but she wasn't there. She was next to herself watching the goings-on, but not really with the capacity to know exactly what was going on. She had glimpses of being in her body and in the thick of the action. The next minute, she was just outside of herself, watching what was going on. She went on like this, in and out of her body for a while, watching everything and being in everything until finally, resoundingly, she fell. More than to the floor, a part of her fell through the floor, and she kept falling until there was nowhere left to fall. She didn't land anywhere, she simply ended up someplace else, surrounded in blue. When she found her bearings, she realized she was in a beautiful lapis blue cavern with a hole in the center of it, streaming in light. She recognized the place, but it was different. It was empty. And it was peaceful. Weird peaceful. Weird quiet. She was in Firewall, or what was left of it. She remembered how Firewall looked and felt when she saw it first. Stifling hot. Impossible to breathe. Soot and souls everywhere. The screams were deafening. In her yai, it was Kwayin, Kai-Tu, she, and her in utero son, who had helped free all the souls. She remembered. Om Namo Ra Om rang through the firewall for the first time. The voices of the children sounded like Carillion in the sky. The lost soul forces of Firewall that screamed their pain from every crevice of their malevolent world finally stopped screaming. It happened in waves. One mouth closed, which caused another to close, and continued until the only sound in Firewall was Om Namo Ra Om. From out of nowhere, rain fell. It was a storm at first, falling in big puddles over everything. Every inch of the black sand became black mud. The blood-red sky became a brilliant blue. Like lapis, it had glittering gold flecks speckled throughout. In place of the soot mountains were diamond ones. Instead of nebulous arms, legs, and heads scattered about, there were whole bodies of clean souls sitting politely next to each other. Firewall was transformed. Lucifer was still ablaze and screaming from his orb of blue fire, but no one could hear him. He watched in horror as the rain stopped and 3 lights appeared on the plateau of one of the diamond mountains. The millions of souls in Firewall looked up, awestruck. A moment later, a light as bright as 1,000 suns filled the cavernous Firewall with warmth and love. Kwayin appeared through the light and smiled. The song of the children, still playing in the background, became Kwayin's melody. When she spoke to all the souls in Firewall, her voice became the sweetest song they ever heard. Each soul force began to sway. The more they sway, the more open, willing, and ready they were. Your ancestors greet each other by saying, Osho Lavayan Hail. It means light, the love, and all. We bow to each other to acknowledge the light we each possess. We then say Osho Lavayan Osho, which means light brings love to light. This greeting is a shortened version of our original mission. The whole phrase is Osho lavain hao ba asharu mairahu nura osho. Osho namaru namaro yamarai yasura yamara ba osho lavain osho. It means light the love in all, because fear lights a man's way to darkness. Light covers. Stillness rises, peace, stillness settles, because light brings love to light. This is your creation story. This is your true identity. It is who you are. Light. Your true language is tu astai, the tongue of stars. This is not your true home. I do not need to tell you that you are here because you chose to be. Your fate has always been your own. If you wish, you may remain here, or you may go home with me. Every soul rose to their feet. Without being asked, they joined in singing the song floating through the air. Om Namo Ra Om. Om Namo Ra Om. Om Namo Ra Om. Through his silent cries of pain, Lucifer could see and hear everything happening below his orb of fire. If he could have guffawed through the flames, he would have. Kuai Yin said that none of them were from here. Where were they from then? He wanted to laugh, but he couldn't. There were glimmers of memories of another world he once lived, but he couldn't focus. The only things loud and clear in him were his pain and his elder voice. You should go too. Humble yourself. Bow at the feet of Kuai Yin. Tell her, Osho Levine Osho, sing the song they're singing and do anything else she wants to get out of here. She won. The war is over, it said. Though he burned and the pain he experienced was so great he almost couldn't feel anything at all, Lucifer resigned himself to hang where he was. All he was now was a burning ball in his former firewall. He watched helplessly as all of his life's work turned to mud and washed away with some rain, a speech, and a song. It wasn't until the memory of her Yai fizzled out that she remembered something. Earthbound souls weren't all from Tustai. The Stai were very specific beings. Humans were very specific beings too. The way Jasperai liked to lose his shit anytime Kai would even arbitrarily mention a Stai and a human in the same breath made it clear that Stai and humans were very different. They were so different that Stai probably wouldn't throw around original languages and such with mere humans. Mere. Her mother was a highly evolved being, but she was still Stai. Maybe she wasn't being kind to the lost souls and giving them something to hope about. Oh, maybe she was being kind to the lost souls and giving them something to hope about. But this was a huge discrepancy. She knew by now that nothing in her Yai was arbitrary. Were any of the souls they saved human souls? Were all of the countless souls that she saw in Firewall Stai? Even when she saved Moreau and Lucifer's other minions, some of them were human, weren't they? Maybe there was another piece to the puzzle she was missing. Either way, if Lucifer had turned his own people into whatever they were, and in such large numbers, wow. Maybe that's why the Stai wanted him returned. He'd come to Earth as a missionary and stayed on as a Stai killer. Stai don't die easily. He certainly wouldn't get a welcome home party, that's for sure. She was thinking about these things when she decided she wanted to have a look around. When she tried to take a step, a sharp pain in her heart caused her to scream out in pain. She stood still. Only then did she see it. Just to the left of a giant diamond mountain, near the center of the massive cavern, was a blinding bright orb filled with blue flames. How she could have missed it initially, she didn't know. It was so bright, it could have been a sun. The blue flames of the orb licked around themselves in such a violent way she should have been able to hear them, but it made no sounds. It was like watching a silent movie in bright blue color. She couldn't help staring at it. She wanted to walk toward it, but every time she even thought to take a step, it felt like a knife was poking at her heart. The violent lapping of the flames made it impossible for her to see what was in the orb, but she knew. Lucifer. She squinted her eyes and focused her vision as hard as she could, just to try and see if she could make out an outline of a hand or a foot from where she was. She knew she had been in that orb for a long time. If he went in during the culmination of her yai, it would have been 7 years burning alive in blue flames. Was he even still alive? Could he be? He had to be. Who else was pulling all the flames, all the strings of all those people of Earth who behaved so poorly? He had to have gotten out somehow to manipulate them to be the kinds of people they were choosing to be. Didn't he? Maybe. She had resolved already that the people of Earth had done a great job of cultivating cruelty all on their own. And if her theory about the souls in Firewall was even a little bit accurate, Lucifer may not have had much to do with how earthbound souls behave as it was. Excuse me. Okay. Her train of thought was interrupted abruptly by the words, "Return your father to your people," kept replaying in her head. "Well, I can't return him if I can't get to him, can I?" she said out loud. When she got sick of hearing the words repeating in her head like a broken record, she knew instinctively that he wasn't dead. She could feel it. She also had no idea how she was supposed to get to him. She wasn't sure if he was watching her up in that orb, plotting her demise, or sound asleep, oblivious that she was even there. If he was plotting on her, would she end up having to fight her own father? She tried to imagine what a battle with her devil father would look like. Every scenario she played out in her head seemed dumb. Lucifer was a lot of things, but he certainly wasn't stupid. Also, based entirely on her experience with him in her yai, he wasn't much of a fighter. He rounded up people to do his fighting for him. Since she had saved everybody he could possibly use to do his bidding, she came to the conclusion that no fighting would happen, unless she was mistaken. It didn't take long after she drew that conclusion for her to realize that she didn't know if she was awake or asleep, or traveling, but with her body. Her heart hurt when she tried to walk. Could she feel her heart do anything at all if she was traveling? She was all kinds of discombobulated. For whatever reason, she thought that if she had her wings, she could fly up and see what she was working with. In that exact instant, a thought crossed her mind. She felt a similar heaviness on her back. She'd shimmied her shoulders just to be sure she hadn't imagined it. Without the slightest hesitation, out her wings popped in their full, glorious span. So, I get my wings in the place where dreams go to die. Priceless, she said. Since walking hurt, she hoped flying wouldn't. She warmed up with a few flaps of her magnanimous wings. Without much effort, up she went. She stayed a few feet away, just in case it was a trick of some kind that Lucifer was playing on her. Her guts told her it wasn't. Her guts told her Lucifer's orb was the handiwork of her mother. If she didn't want what was inside to be out, it would stay in until she did. It was with this more confident awareness that she moved closer to the giant orb and tried to peer inside. But the thickness of the blue flames made that impossible. She kept moving closer and closer until she was right up on the thing, but she still couldn't see anything. Not a hand, not a foot, not a nose or a face. Nothing. Maybe he was dead. 7 years, burning alive inside of violent, silent blue flames could do that to a person. She wanted to give the orb one last look before she gave up and went about whatever other business she might have had in Firewall. She got so close to the orb, she accidentally put her tattooed hand through the flames. Gah! She said, and her body jolted backwards. She was checking her hand to see if it was burned. By the time she looked up at the orb again, the flames had stopped abruptly. The orb had gone from bright lapis blue to bright gold in an instant. The violence of the lapping flames had dispersed into a pulsing solid gold. The orb itself began to match its pulse to her heartbeat. She could actually see it adjusting to the beating of her heart as she heard ever more loudly in her ears. The more the orb beat, the thinner the skin of its opaque walls. After a few rounds of beating and thinning, the walls of the orb were thin enough for her to see the outlines of a body lying in the center of the orb. When she moved closer, staring at the man, she was surprised. The mad being she knew to be Lucifer from her yai wasn't in there. Instead, she recognized a bright but faint resemblance of a man she'd only seen on a portrait that hangs in her Hayu back in Tuesday. She couldn't say for sure she was looking at that man, but she could definitely say she couldn't see the Lucifer from her yai in him. She could also say he looked exactly like a regular Stai man, which was funny for her to think because there was no such thing as a regular Stai anything. For a long while, the man just lay in the same spot, not moving, not twitching, nothing. The golden glow of the orb made his skin look more golden than it was, and made his golden hair look like sunshine. She hadn't a clue how she was supposed to get him out of the thing, or if he was okay where he was. She half thought she had done what she came to do. She stopped the flames. It wasn't until the orb started dropping that she started to panic. The man inside hadn't stirred at all. Her panic began when she thought about what would happen when he did stir. What if the orb opened up and Lucifer stepped out of the thing like nothing happened, or remembered everything that he did? What would she say to him? He was her father biologically, but she didn't know him. He was just a man that helped destroy the earth, or whom she was also supposed to save. But truly, let's save like this. But truly, she could take or leave him. As the orb kept dropping, a million scenarios played out in her head. None of them she wanted to deal with. She had panicked about facing Henny, so she had somehow ended up in the remnants of Firewall. Facing her father made her forget about panicking about Henny. But now she was panicking about Lucifer. She had no idea what to do. So she hid behind the biggest of the Diamond Mountains until she could figure it out. 3, 4, 5. So that was chapter 31. I think there's something wrong with this here because I can't swipe. Oh, duh. Ha ha ha. Who's here? You guys were here the whole time. That is so funny. I'm sorry. I did something wrong. You guys were here the whole time. Hi, Kelly. Hi, Raj. Oh, you guys had told me 29:30. Oh my goodness. Sorry. But I had swiped. What had happened was I had swiped and then I couldn't see everybody there. So thank you, Raj. And I didn't even know all y'all were here. Because this whole time I was reading, it looked like there was nobody here. And I was like, all right, but I saw people viewing. So I was like, well, there were people. Told you, discombobulated. Do you guys know that this is day 21, that we've been doing this for 21 days? Do you know? Do you know? Do you know? Do you know? So 21 days we've been reading. That is so dope. So I think what I'm going to do, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to read chapter 32 too, only because Yeah, that's what I'm gonna do. We're gonna read chapter 32 too. Okay. Okay. Okay, Steve. Thank you. That's all right. Honey, discombobulation day. This is crazy. Okay, so we're gonna read. So I know which parts I'm gonna edit out of this. I'm gonna edit out the whole beginning where I'm looking for the chapters that you guys. Okay, buddy. So yes, that's what I'm gonna do. Chapter 32, True Daughter. Never grow a wishbone, daughter, where your backbone ought to be. Clementine Pableford said that. Yeah, the gang's all here, right? There was nothing happening where she was. There seemed to be nothing happening where the orb had landed either. Kai kept peeking from behind the mountain just to make sure nothing was happening. For some reason, she felt more deflated every single time she peeked, and her suspicions were confirmed. Nothing was happening. In her imagination, the orb would land, and out would pop her father in dramatic fashion. He would be surrounded by thick gray smoke that emphasized all the levels of evil he was. He would step through the blinding, suffocating smoke and cackle endlessly to torment her. She would be afraid for a while until she found enough inner strength to battle him on his turf and, of course, win. She hadn't imagined she would have or need a weapon, so she hadn't imagined what weapons she would fight him with to defeat him. The only thing she knew or needed to know is that whatever happened, she would win. Since nothing was happening at the moment, she was becoming infinitely more impatient with the process. Lucifer didn't seem to care about her impatience or her weird need to battle him in her mind. He was still in the orb, as far as she could tell, laying on his back, doing nothing, and in completely uneventful fashion. Her peering from behind the mountain began to happen more frequently, as she became increasingly more impatient and decidedly a bit paranoid. Maybe he wasn't still in the orb. Maybe he had gotten up and walked away while she was hiding. Maybe she had missed the choking smoke and the dramatic entrance while she was sitting around waiting for it to happen. Maybe he was hiding somewhere, all ready to pounce on her at any moment. Maybe he was behind her. She spun around feverishly just to make sure, but again, she was disappointed. He wasn't behind her, and she presumed he was still laying in the orb in the exact way she saw him last. It wasn't until a few more rounds of her vivid imagination that a bit of common sense appeared to her. Maybe instead of driving herself crazy, she would physically walk over, check in with the orb, instead of imagining what was going on within it. She also had to figure out how she actually found her way to Fire Hawa to begin with. From there, she could figure out a way back to her family and also let them figure out what to do with Lucifer. But then, she thought about Henny. But more than just Henny, she thought about Yaman, Jasperai, and Henny in the same place. The thought of such things made her cringe. She actually preferred sharing a cavern with her evil father rather than be up in that reality show waiting to happen. With a heavy sigh, she slowly allowed her grandest fears about Lucifer settle enough that she could emerge from behind the Diamond Mountain and slowly walk the path toward the orb. It had stopped glowing. It looked exactly like a frosted glass bubble sitting on a slick ocean of gold-flecked lapis. It had adjusted its optics so it was no longer clear enough for her to see inside. It wasn't until she was a few paces away that she realized two things. First, she was walking. The only reason this was noteworthy was because her heart didn't hurt walking like before, and second, her mala had changed. It was heavier, and the purple guru stone that was usually carved was now a huge chunk of purple stone, exactly the way Damascus had worn it when he first saw it. She wanted to stop and admire it, but she decided that in such close proximity to her notoriously unwell father, maybe she should tuck it under her robes instead. The mala was heavy in her hands, and when she tucked it under her robes, it bulged in a way that made her look like she had a third boob just underneath her actual boobs. She was paying extra close attention to each of her steps. She could feel the blood pulsing through her legs and feet, coupled with the loud pulsing of her heart with every step. It felt like she was walking through thick mud, and the closer she got to the orb, the thicker the mud. It was then that she noticed the orb was no longer beating with her heart. She was sure that it had been before, but when it was glowing. But now it wasn't glowing. It wasn't doing anything. Maybe the beating and the glowing was how she knew her father was still alive in there. Maybe the fact that it wasn't doing anything meant her father had... She pushed through the feeling of walking through mud and ran. Once there, without thinking, she put both hands on the orb. She wanted to see if he was still inside, if he was still alive. She didn't remember him. She didn't remember anything about him as her father or why she should care. But for some reason she did. She couldn't see inside, no matter how closely she pressed her nose to the glass. Suddenly, the only thing that mattered to her was the man inside. Evil as he made himself out to be, she needed to know he was okay. She needed him to be okay. There was no fanfare about how the orb and its opaque glass fizzled and disappeared. It was such a matter-of-fact process that it was barely registered that the orb was no longer there, and all that remained of it was the body of a golden-colored man. Her mouth dropped. It was the first time she had seen her father up close and real. She'd always believed that her surrogate father, Tim, was her real father. Many times she would stare in Tim's face and not see anything that she recognized of herself in him. It always made her feel sad and a little lost because she tried desperately to attribute any of his features to herself. She didn't share a single thing with him. Not his smile, not his laugh, not his quiet sensibilities. She didn't share a similar nose or skin coloring. Her thick black curls were not of him. What was interesting was that she looked a bit more like her surrogate mother, Diane, in coloring and hair texture, but they were only superficial similarities. She never wanted to see herself in Diane, but people would tell her all the time that she looked just like her. She never questioned or even had an inkling that her surrogate parents weren't her biological parents, even despite their dissimilarities. She simply thought it was as they said. She was weird. But it always bothered her that she couldn't see herself in Tim specifically, and that he didn't see any bits of himself in her. Acknowledging this made looking at her true biological father, Lucifer, all the more intense for her. She was only a few steps away. She could see him fine from where she was, but it wasn't close enough. She needed to see if she could see herself in him. Even any number of his horrible, selfish, destructive qualities, even if it meant she would have to face the side of herself she never truly acknowledged, the side that confirmed that she was born of the vilest and evilest character that ever walked the crust of the earth. As slowly as she could muster, one foot in front of the other, she stepped toward the lifeless body laying a few steps in front of her. She was being careful that her bones didn't crack and cause an imbalance in the billowing quiet that had become so comfortable in the cavern. The closer she got, the more golden her father looked to her. It was weird for her to think he looked golden when everything about him was actually gray. In his portrait, his hair was a rich golden color and looked so much like a lion's mane. Standing over him and far enough away from his heavy-looking hands that he couldn't grab her abruptly, she noticed that his hair had only traces of the spun gold it once was. It was long, but stringy and lifeless. It actually had no color at all. It was exactly gray or white. It wasn't exactly gray or white. It looked almost like he was a drawing, and someone had forgotten to color his hair in, save for a few strands of gold here and there. His skin was the same way. It looked like skin. It had skin texture, but it didn't look real. There was absolutely no color in his face or his hands, and his robes shared a similar colorlessness. As she was witnessing what it looked like when Astyae died, it was a horrible thing to see. And yet her true reason for finding her way as close to Lucifer as she was to see if she looked like him. And so she studied his face. She couldn't tell the color of his eyes because they were closed. She'd been so focused on her mother and the portrait, she spent very little time even considering such details like his eye color. The only thing she really remembered was his curly mane of golden hair, and as it stood, his mane was neither golden, curly, or mane-like. So she focused her attention on his nose. She bent over him so she could see it properly, but she couldn't tell if she shared her nose with him without looking at herself in a mirror. If eureka feelings came with an obnoxiously loud pop, it was precisely what happened. She remembered the mirror that was on her person in some way, shape, form, or fashion. She had itemized it on her list of talents, but she never got to the part where she figured out how to access them. She would have given a kidney to have Damascus with her at the moment to help her expedite the process some. But she also knew help was not forthcoming. She was told more times than she cared to acknowledge that she and she alone was sent to bring her father home. That turned out to be the most disconcerting theme in her yai. Kwain had told Yamin that only Lucifer's true daughter could return him. She also told him that he was supposed to be her balance. It didn't turn out that way, did it? She wanted to get pissed off all over again, but looking down on her father's face made her focus involuntarily on the words she never really wanted to ponder for any length of time. True daughter. What in the hell did that mean anyway? True daughter. It was equal parts redundant, oxymoronic, and ironic. Her being the true daughter to a man she had never known in any way she had memories to cement was the most contradictory and the most ironic parts that lingered the longest. The fact that somebody had to be more than just a daughter, but a true daughter to somebody else, just sounded dumb to her. But those were the words. If Kai knew anything at all about her journey so far, it was that when something came up that was so subtle and yet so specific, it was for blatant and specific purposes. She looked down at Lucifer's face again. She remembered the mirror again. So she checked her tattooed palm again. It wasn't doing anything special, nor did it look as dimensional as it had before. It looked flat and exactly like a regular gold and silver tattoo. She only poked at it a few times just to be sure, if only because if Lucifer did happen to pop awake, she didn't want his first sighting of her to be about her poking at her hand and looking utterly ridiculous in the process. But then she thought about what Jasperi had said about the words sai and tai sa, that maybe she had the meanings or uses of the words wrong. He said she should sit in meditation and figure out if she remembered the elder's tongue, but something in her was screaming that she was missing something. But it wasn't the tongue of the elders. It was something small and subtle that was begging her to remember, something the mirror told her. It showed her the rainbow lava and her surrogate family in trouble. She tried with all she could to pull at the memory to remember, but she was too wound up. As much as she wanted to simply get on with it, she had to follow at least a part of Jasperi's direction. She had to sit. But she was also paranoid that the lifeless body of Lucifer would spontaneously reanimate while she was distracted and kill her. He didn't look dangerous. He looked mostly dead. But then again, if she remembered correctly, Lucifer was exceptionally clever, even though he looked deader in her yai than he did at the moment. Then she remembered the orb Jasperi said she had around her. Then she remembered the orb Jasperi said she had around her while she was writing. Maybe she could make one of those, but she didn't know how she did it that time. Maybe it would just appear. Maybe she could just trust that she was going to be okay. Maybe all she had to do was trust that if anything at all was happening, it was happening for her and not to her. Maybe the phrase Osharu Mayarahu Nur Osho, fear lights a man's way to darkness, was created for moments exactly like the one she was in. Maybe it was crafted so she would remember to be brave, even in the face of insane uncertainty. It took every ounce of her faith to sit as close to Lucifer as she decided to. She sat right next to him in lotus position. She took another really long look at his face, trying to remember all of his obvious features, just in case she would need to remember him because something weird happened with her eyes closed. She took many long, deep breaths until she felt comfortable enough to close her eyes. It took a while because every time she closed her eyes and tried to settle, her eyes popped open to make sure Lucifer hadn't moved. It was an utterly disconcerting way to begin a meditation, but she kept at it until she got it. Finally, her mind settled. She shook herself free from her doubts and fears of the moment and just let peace wash over her. She focused resolutely on her breath. By the time she could actually see the air coming in and going out of her body through her mind's eye, she realized she was somewhere else entirely. She was in space, or what seemed like space, although there weren't any stars. There was darkness all around her, but it wasn't because there wasn't any light. She could see fine. There just wasn't anything to see. So maybe it wasn't darkness she was seeing, but a void. She was also floating. She could move all of her limbs, and she knew she could move anywhere she wanted to, but there wasn't any place really she wanted to go. She wanted to remember her father, her true father, before he became the Lord of all evil on earth. But there's no place for her to go to do that. She just had to remember him, but she couldn't remember him. It was a weird instinct, really, that sent her mind back to when she first faced the mirror. She was remembering the tail end of the conversation she and the mirror were having. She remembered the tail end of the conversation she and the mirror were having. She was sitting in a chair in a tight, cold stone room. "Is this all you wish for me to see?" Kai asked, catching her bearings. "Ikea nom. You will save another, but not now," the mirror said. "Should I stay here until you are ready? Or shall I rejoin my family?" Kai asked. "Ikea nom. We are connected now. You need not sit before me to see what is necessary. Ikea nom is how you call me to show you what must be seen." "Omni Osho," Kai said with a deep-seated bow. "Yes," it said. And then the mirror rose from where it rested, still attached by the light beam between the eye of her crown and the eye of its decor. It lifted and thinned itself out until it was no more than a golden mist. The light from her crown's eye pulled, and the mirror mist added itself to it. Kai's eyes popped open. Her father was still laying lifeless, and she was still sitting in lotus. Nothing around her had shifted at all. She didn't even have an orb around her, so apparently she wasn't in any danger. "Ikea nam. You will save another," is what the mirror said. "Maybe you, and maybe now, is what the mirror meant," Kai said out loud, looking squarely at Lucifer. What in the hello Pete just happened? Whew, honey. You know that's a setup, right? You know y'all are about to be set up, right? So, wow. What are your thoughts? I forgot. I forgot about that. And yes, Jason, her curiosity is strong. Like, if that's the first time you meet your dad up close, my curiosity would be strong too. I'd be like, I know he the devil, but I want to see, do I have horns too? Just kidding. But serious. So questions, comments, problems, or solutions? Anybody? Now that I know that you're all here and you're all like comments. So what are your thoughts? What did you think? That was a lot. And there were a lot of right, Raj, right. But then again, you have to remember You have to remember, Lucifer is a concept. And in this story, Lucifer is a person that went batshit crazy. Do you know what I'm saying? So that's the challenge, to take ourselves out of our perception of what we believe the devil to be. Like, what if our concepts of God and the devil from a human perspective, we got it fucked up? You get what I'm saying? What if these people, like one person, our concept of God, one person has lived up to her potential, the same potential that we could live up to. Just so happens she was able to do it, and so we're viewing her as a god. And what if there was a person who came from the same stock as she did that, you know, went batshit crazy? But he's a powerful being. He knows all the universal law. Might have even taught universal law. Was, you know, all the principles. A lot of this stuff was covered in the first book. But what if that's what happened? And so now you have an extraordinarily powerful being who understands universal law that went batshit crazy. What do you think that would look like? Right? So it changes the dynamic of how we have this conversation, and how we, you know, flippantly use words and create stories and all of that stuff. What if it's not what it looks like? You know what I'm saying? Like, what if this is like one big elaborate whisper down the lane that happened, and that's how we got our concept of God and the devil. Like one big long whisper down the lane. And so I think part of what goes on in the story is it you know, you can see that the themes are rule yourself. There's a lot of universal law in there. There are ancient mystical concepts in there, and as the kind of the foundation. But then it just explores things. I think the one thing was like, okay, so how do you make sense of patriarchy? You know what I'm saying? And so book one, there are lots of themes that explore that. How do you, and I don't mean like just regular old patriarchy. I mean that toxic patriarchy, like I hate women kind of thing. And how did the world get so imbalanced? How did the world, why did the divine feminine kind of fall away? Why is it not balanced between the divine feminine and the divine masculine? How did it get just all masculine and then kind of toxic masculine too? And so without bashing masculinity, how do you rectify these things? Do you know what I'm saying? So I think that's kind of the thread that pulls the story together. That is really not a good or a bad, because you see, I'm not like the concept of the devil in here. That's what I think I make pains in kind of stressing that it's our concept of the devil. It's not necessarily the devil. And so what if he actually was a person, well, a sthayi person, a highly evolved being that lost his way? And what does that look like if he happened to be on Earth and have access to people? You know what I'm saying? So that's kind of my take on it. You might get a different perspective, but I just reading that reminded me. I was like, oh, well, okay, that's what I was thinking. Oh, she has to save Lucifer. Yeah, right. Interesting. She has to save the light bearer in order to enlighten the world. Well, I'm not going to tell you what's going to happen, because I think we're going to finish this book this week. I really, really do. I think we can. But you have to understand how deep it is. Like one of the things that happened in book one, and I can tell you because it kind of hinted in here. So Firewall, and that's Firewall is hell, but they call it Firewall in this story. And Firewall was really like this very weird place. So it had black sand. It was black sand, and there were souls, and they were like computer screen. I don't know how to explain it. They're like they look like the noise from a TV, and they were just stuck haphazardly everywhere. And so the scene of Firewall was very disconcerting, very eerie, weird. And Kai, by the time Kai and Kai 2, and the her in utero baby. So we know potentially that was, well, it's not potentially, we know that's Picard. That was Picard when he was in her belly. So we come in full circle again. Once whatever happened with the light, and I can't remember, I mean, I can remember, but I can't tell you what it is word for word, but whatever happened in that particular scene, Firewall went from being very red, like the walls of the cavern were blood red, and it was black sand. And by the time they were finished, whatever they were doing in there, the walls, Lucifer was in that blue fire orb thing, and everything in the cavern was blue. It was lapis and gold. And so what's interesting is they had saved all of those souls that were in Firewall, and Lucifer was left there, as we discovered in the last 2 chapters. Lucifer was left there for the last 7 years to burn in his blue orb in a Firewall that looked nothing like how it started. It was no longer soot, it was blue, it was whatever. And then Kai returned there after the fact. Because remember, one of her key jobs is to return Lucifer to her people. So and she's going to go over this at some point. She's going to re-go over it. So she's got to return. But one of the themes from the very beginning, from book 1, was she's to return Lucifer to their people. And then the other one is to plant the Magnanite tree, which at some point is supposed to balance the entwine. And the entwine was something we went over in book 1. It's basically the joining of joy. It's like it was explained. They called it the joining of joy in book 1, and by they I mean the elders in the Eden. But I think there's going to be a deeper explanation of it in coming books, because it's going to be, remember, book 1 was really her yai. It was, and I can say that, I guess, book 1 was really just the contents of an elaborate dream. So I feel like whatever was going on in the dream, even though it was categorically correct, it was flowery. So I think what's going to go on in future books is going to be more concrete, and you're going to get more clear definitions of all of these things and what that means for us as we expand. The church created the misogyny state of my taking women out of the Bible, or demonizing her, removing the whole... That's right. And it's interesting though. It's interesting though that a battle in book 1 took place in Cathedral, and that Damascus, when you go back to book 1, Damascus was a really old priest in that cathedral. And remember, Damascus is something, I don't even know still what Damascus actually is. I mean, and I'm very clear by saying what he is, because in book 1 he was a very, very old priest, and he's come back, like he came back in book 2 as kind of like a father figure, if you will, the elder, whatever, very wise. And then he came back again. He comes, he'll see him again in this book too. So I don't know what that represents, but I think it's just interesting that you said that specifically. And Cathedral, Lucifer wants something that's in Cathedral, and I think that was brought up already. He wants something that's in Cathedral. That's why this battle took place. So what was in Cathedral that caused, this battle to take place, that caused, essentially all of this that's happening? So that is a very astute point that you made. I don't think I'm going to fully understand the picture until I've written all of the books. and that's saying something because I'm writing the books. But again, I'm not like a typical writer. I don't have an outline. I don't know how it ends. I'm not doing this. What I'm doing is putting myself in play and making myself available for the insights that come through. So I'm finding out what's going on as I'm writing it. And having not read this book for a year, like I have fresh eyes reading it too. So I feel just like you, like, this is really happening. Oh, snap, whatever. So very, very good insight. Cool. I like these mystery books that make you think. Well, thank you, Jason. Thank you. There are other, if you're just catching up, because we're on now we're going on to chapter 33. So tomorrow we're going to be on chapter 33. So Jason, if you want to catch up, you can go to my Stellar Trilogy page, the Facebook Stellar Trilogy page, and all the videos are up there. So yeah. Yeah. Very, very insightful. So, and I want to go back to the light bearer. She has to save the light bearer in order to enlighten the world. So the only thing at this juncture that I think... So Picard was conceived to replace the light we lost, right? So was Lucifer supposed to be the original light and he just got fucked up? And then Picard is supposed to replace him? Or is there something else going on with this light thing? Because the name of the book is Light of the War. Picard called himself Light of the War. Light of the War. I feel like there's something like that's going to unfold too. And I'm trying to understand what is that's something that I'm sure is going to work out. You're so silly. The building fund was in the cathedral. How else are you going to get the bends? Yeah, I think, but you have to see, and again, I don't know, we don't know that much about Lucifer before. And I think it's interesting that these 2 chapters spent a lot of time on Kai kind of pondering the dynamic of what that means. She brought up, well, I don't know anything about my father before he was, he became this thing. I don't know anything. And so I think that's going to be important to discover what it is Lucifer wants in that cathedral. Because remember, the very first thing they did when they walked through that door, Lara had Kai heal the water, and then she walked them over to cathedral. And because they didn't say that was cathedral, but we can take a very strong gander that it was cathedral. Kai never saw it from the outside. She only saw it from the inside. Remember, it was part of a thing. So the very first thing that Lara had them do was heal that cathedral so that it could stay hidden. And that is not a mistake. You get what I'm saying? There's something in there, and there's something valuable. And we might need to go back to that chapter and read through it again after we're done, just to kind of put some of these clues together, because that is not a game. There's something, and then the fact that even Moreau, when he was describing what was going on, there was something in cathedral that Lucifer wanted. What is it that he wants? And then as these chapters go on, you're going to see. What? So any other questions, comments, problems, solutions, anything else? So tomorrow, which is mañana, which is Monday, we are going to read chapter 33 and potentially chapter 34. And we're going to move right on along with this. And the goal is to be done before the end of the month, by the end of the month. And I'm very excited. I think some of the pieces are coming together, and you guys are getting it, and I'm loving it. I'm loving the insights you're giving me that I can take with me on my journey so I can ponder my own work. So if you guys don't have, 11:11 still in the morning, we do Stop, Drop, and Meditate. So you're welcome to join if you have not yet. We have I do an affirmative prayer in the beginning that get pretty darn powerful. And then we meditate together for 20 minutes after that. And then, of course, 11 p.m., we are here for Star People Storytime. And, of course, we'd love to have you. If you're new, you can catch up by going to the Stellar Trilogy page, the Stellar Trilogy Facebook page, yes? Okay, guys, if you don't have anything else for me, I'm glad I finally figured out how to work my own Facebook Live settings. I will see you guys tomorrow. Yes? 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 All right, my loves, I love you. You know I do. Levian Heil Star People. And I will see you tomorrow. Oh, wait. Oh. Bye.